Hello and welcome to SA Decides Convenience Poll. Your vote counts. Now, the battle for the metros is hotting up as several assessments in the media are suggesting that the voter support for the ANC is shaky on the ground. Some even going as far as to say the party will be lucky to get majorities in any metro in Gauteng. But the ANC is not showing any signs of nervousness, at least not in public. Is the governing party's conviction well-founded? We find out on the show ahead. Now, in the 6th edition of our election tracker, we focus on the most hotly contested province in the country, and here are the main points of discussion. How was the ANC placed in the race for the metropolitan cities in Gauteng? It's bold to be a neck-and-neck battle. Who is most likely to cross the finishing line first? Political equilibrium shifting fast in Johannesburg. Will the DA succeed in eroding the ANC's lead in the metro? Hit by unrest and violence, will Tshwane see the gap between the DA and ANC closing or widening further? The ANC seems to be counting down to victory, a sentiment conveyed to the public when President Jacob Zuma launched the countdown campaign last week. But is there absolutely no reason for the party to be concerned? We have a comprehensive panel to discuss the results projected by a survey ahead of the elections. And in studio, we have Subesh Pillay, ANC Executive Mayor of Tlokwe, and Councillor Khotso Khumalo. Herman Mashaba is a DA Johannesburg mayoral candidate. Heinrich Volmik is a DA MP. Ndumiso Mukako, ANC Youth League NEC member. Professor Sipho Siepe, political analyst. Jabu Mahlangu is the national spokesperson for Sanko. Alex Mashilo is SACP national spokesperson. And we're also joined by Super Zuma, ANC Secretary General in, or Provincial Secretary General in KwaZulu-Natal. And Thabo Manyoni is the Executive Mayor of Maung Metro. Now, in the tale of two cities, we first begin with Tshwane. Marred by political unrest, the metro is definitely headed for an interesting contest ahead. What do the numbers say? And it's over to my colleague Shante for the details.
Indeed, Cindy. Well, this week we'll be focusing mainly on Tshwane as well as Johannesburg. We do know that these are the two hotly contested metros. We're going to start with Tshwane here. Firstly, which party can deliver services? Well, 0.9% of people feel that the DA is going to be able to deliver services in Tshwane. Just trailing not too far behind, that is quite close. 41.3% feel that ANC would be able to deliver, and of course the EF there at 8.9%. Moving along, which party do you think will win in your municipality? Of course, this is with the upcoming local government elections. 47.7% of people feel the ANC would win, and we see here the margin increases between the ANC and the DA. The DA just below that 40 percentage point there, and the EFF trailing at 8.3%. Who do you think you would vote for if local elections were held today? Many people getting confused. If elections were held today, who would you vote for? Well, 45.8% of people in Gauteng for Tshwane would vote for the ANC, trailing behind there not too far. 42% of people would be voting for the DA, and 5.4% of people would be voting for the EFF. Moving along, if we have a look at national polls, if they were held today, of course we do know that national polls are set to take place in 2 years' time. According to the statistics we have, 47.5% of people would still be voting for the ANC, the DA not trailing too far behind there, 40.3%, and the EFF trailing dismally at 6.7%. Nevertheless, they have made the cuts in the top three. Over to you.
So this is the question that we posed to our respondents regarding the confidence that they have in the various political parties. And just starting off in Tshwane, it's a very complicated one in the sense that the numbers tend to vary based on the question that you put to respondents. But if compared to the question of service delivery, the DA there has more confidence than what the ANC has. As opposed to when you ask people who they would vote for, they tend to lean for the ANC. What is it that you think the DA is doing right or wrong?
Well, I think if you look at Tshwane, including Johannesburg, but I think in this particular case you're asking about Tshwane. If you look at the unemployment rate in the city has been going completely reaching unacceptable levels. You look at service deliveries like housing, water, and other service delivery issues. Look, I think our colleague in Pretoria, Soli, has got a very, very good chance of capturing that city because of the failures of the ANC government, the current ANC government.
Yeah, but if we just go with the science here and the numbers again, that the overall respondents of the sample that we used are confident that the DA can deliver services and yet will not govern. Why do you think that is, Andre?
Firstly, the first statistic shows that people are tired in Tshwane. They're tired of empty promises and political rhetoric that doesn't get the services done. We know that the DA municipalities that are in this country that are governed by the DA outperform ANC municipalities. In the governance performance index, for example, out of the top 10, 9 were DA run and the bottom 20 were ANC. So people recognize and they realize this. And I think that coming back to the other statistic in terms of why then would they vote for the ANC according to this poll, well, the poll is dynamic. 54.8% say that they would vote for the ANC. However, 55.3% of the number is a number that the ANC has in Tshwane in the council. So in fact, it shows a drop. And 61% it was a national share in 2011. So what is actually showing dynamically is a drop in support for the ANC.
Yeah, we see, and I know a lot of parties won't want to admit in terms of the decline of voter base. We do have the stats for 2011, and the DA similarly this year around, you've also shared be it 2% or marginal figures. So let's just be fair on that part, that you're not immune to having lost numbers. But I just want to go back to service delivery. You're about 2% above what people perceive to be the strength of the DA when it comes to service delivery. And yet, again, it's what considerations do voters make when deciding on the governing party, would you say, Mr. Mugwagwa?
I think firstly, I must say that the Institute League, we treat these polls with a pinch of salt for a number of reasons. The first is that in the previous elections, they've proved not to be that reliable. For instance, in 2014, another Namora had said that Ahang will have about 7% or 5% of the voter share, and Ahang only stood at 0.28. And even amongst themselves, they do not agree as what is going to happen. We have Namora and Ipsos now. Ipsos has said that the ANC is likely to lose the three metros.
What do you think you're doing right? What is the ANC doing right?
As the ANC, we have a tried and tested method of doing door-to-door, where we engage with our people in the comforts of their home, and they assure us that they are going to vote for the African National Congress. So sitting here, I can confirm to you that the ANC will do well in the upcoming local government elections and will not lose any metro. Without any doubt, I can assure you that we'll leave Mr. Herman Mashaba, Mr. Masango in the street polls where they are hanging as candidates today.
As we mentioned, we're also comparing the 2011 local government elections, and there's very little drastic change, if you will. But we're seeing the parties consolidating their core voter base, as it were. And maybe that's why we don't see such a large shift. Although the DA would like to believe that it's grown tremendously and diversified, etc., the numbers speak for themselves, and that's what we're going to stick to. Do you think that we're going back to that traditional purist method of voting, or is there something that the parties can still do in this crunch time?
No, well, 2 points. I mean, firstly, without questioning the methodology of the survey, the Gauteng City Region Observatory did a quality of life survey. That puts Tshwane at a 60% satisfaction rate. So, I mean, you can contest those numbers. The point is you're contrasting it against a much more empirical survey that was done by the Gauteng City Region Observatory, and as I say, 60%. I think the electorate is more sophisticated. I don't think it's a historical voting pattern. I think you are seeing that voters are making conscious decisions about who they vote for based on their experience with government. And that's in our own research in the ANC suggesting that, as you're suggesting, in our own strongholds, we are certainly consolidating, and that's why over the past few weeks with all of the surveys, you've been seeing that increased trend in the ANC picking up. Because our campaign has now gotten to the level where it is, and you are beginning to see that reflecting in the numbers. So I mean, we remain confident that the polls are the polls. based on our own experience, the door-to-door work that we're doing, the engagements with communities and sectors across the province, we're certainly confident that we will retain all of the metros with a reasonable and sizable majority.
Okay, I'm going to invite an independent mind here, Mr. Tsepo Khadima, perhaps just looking at the voter behavior as well. The projections for 2011, at least, it was 55.32 for the ANC. This time around, in 2016, projections are that the ANC will retain Tshwane by a very thin margin again at 45.8%. The DA in the last local elections were 38.65. This time around, it's projected at 42.7%. Just the difference of about, give or take, at 3% between the two-horse race there. And again, why is it that we don't see the shift going more towards the DA in light of the city that is imploding? We saw all the political dissatisfaction with the nomination of Thoko Didiza, for example.
I think the benefit of a poll is to really give a marker to the contesting parties in this election in terms of really where they need to work a little bit harder and where the areas where maybe they need to be a little bit successful. But when one looks at it, certainly, I think the African National Congress has a bit of ground that it has lost, and that I'm seeing from the ground that they are probably working hard to gain that ground. But at the same time, the poll has encouraged the Democratic Alliance to actually give them confidence that perhaps maybe they might just be able to give that final push that maybe might put them in a position where the ANC doesn't become at all victorious. So the next week, I think, is going to really be critical for all the parties to say, what are the things that they can do? Every vote counts in this election, and but certainly the polling itself, I think without polling, the campaigning and the politics wouldn't work. So my own opinion is that the ANC has got a very good chance of retaining it, but it's going to be a very reduced margin, even if they work hard, because of the problems that we have seen. And with the Democratic Alliance, my own observation is that they've been really more high-tech, less high-touch. What do I mean? More social media, more advertising, more media, less really contact, because they do not have the inherent strength which the ANC has, being what? The branches. And certainly I don't think that they can microwave being in the majority, either in Tshwane or in Johannesburg or Ekurhuleni. It's something that they probably have to work on over a number of years.
Professor Siepe, let's throw in a spanner in the works here. The new kid on the block, the EFF in 2011, didn't contest the elections, and now they're sitting at least at 6% of the national representation. The 10% that we've spoken about that the ANC had lost in the last election is not necessarily gravitating towards the DA, maybe even absorbed by the EFF. What dynamic does the EFF bring in this particular contestation?
Well, the EFF brings in or is going to draw on those members of the ANC who are unhappy but could not countenance the possibility of voting for the DA because of historical reasons and also the current reason. I mean, the DA still has to deal with the fact that most of its supporters are white, or at least there's that trend. And when you see that, even though you do see an increase in number of blacks supporting the DA, it still has to address that issue. But also, we must also be very careful about how we read the dynamics. What the DA has been able to do, and this is what you also get from the polls, when you ask separate questions, people will honestly respond to those questions. But when you ask a collective question that says, who are you going to vote for? They are able to bring all that, because it's not only about the delivery of services, it's also about the emotional attachment. There's issue of the social capital, there is issue of political history, and there's also issue of who can you trust. But here, what you find, what has been weak for the ANC, is that the DA has been able to sell this message that where we govern, we do it better, and they've been very consistent. And they've also come up with the statement that they've been made that look at the top performing municipalities. They are those that belong to the DA. But you need to ask, the ANC needs to ask, how many of those, because we have so many municipalities, and then you disaggregate those in terms of color, you might actually find that where the DA has done well is in those areas that have been privileged by apartheid. So when they continue to make those claims about where we govern better, the ANC could simply say, let us look at that. These are the people who are celebrating apartheid special settlement, where the resource base has historically been in white areas. So if you now start going to poor areas where black people are, if black people there are saying the services that we get are equitable to those that are provided by white people, to white people, then you will have a different time. So what I see here is the ANC is unable to challenge the claims that are being made. But the DA must be given at least credit in a sense of saying,
where
the message is coherent.
They've done very well. I hate to interrupt you, but let's invite Executive Mayor of Tlokwe, and just to get your response, Councillor Khumalo, in the sense from what Professor Siepe is saying, that essentially it is about resources, it is about opportunities not being equitable with blacks and whites, and that's why we see this close race being fought largely with the DA and the ANC using that race card to an extent, saying black people vote for the ANC because of what we've done for you. Do you think that's why we haven't seen much of a bigger competition, if you will, in the Tshwane and Johannesburg area?
The ANC has always been a non-racial, non-sexist organization. Therefore, it has never really concentrated on trying to win black votes. It has made it clear, Africans in particular, but blacks in general, but everybody has been supporting those people who are supporting the ANC, cut across communities. It is just that the DA, at a particular point in time, that created a relationship with the ID in which they were wooing a lot of colored votes. But of lately, with the introduction of Musi Maimane, Lino Mazibuka, and many others, there's a change in terms of strategy. So you see a lot of some of the colored communities not necessarily moving with the DA, and the ANC continue to make serious strides. I can tell you today, in Potchefstroom, in Tlokwe, these current serving DA councillors have just crossed the floor from the DA to the ANC. More than 300 of their members also came over. Now, for me, it's not about whether blacks will vote for the ANC and whites for the DA. And I can also tell you that with Musi Maimane heading the DA, you see a lot of the conservative whites leaving DA, going to Freedom Front in terms of those. So therefore, we're doing quite well. The statistics have shown that the decline of members, the decline of voters in some instances is where you've got serious development in your metros, in your internal metros, like in Soweto, in Pretoria, in whatever now. The more people get services, the less they participate in democratic institutions of society. But also you've got the push and pull factors in the bigger cities. Those who come and occupy land illegally outside the cities, they find that they become dissatisfied because they're not getting services due to the fact that the areas are not yet proclaimed. And those who are inside, they themselves, they started to participate less and less. So you've got those type of factors. Outside your Durban, you would have the landless movement outside Soweto, outside Johannesburg, you've got those type of issues. But I can tell you, we're making strides and we're changing things.
ANC Provincial Secretary in KwaZulu-Natal, Super Zuma, thanks for joining us. But if any party doesn't get an overall win in the metros, what implication does that have in terms of forming a government and possibly having to form coalitions to ensure that there's a legislature, etc.? Mr. Zuma.
No, yes, we think as ANC, we are campaigning to win all metros, all municipalities. So we don't want even to talk about coalition at this point in time. We think, as you, also have heard from other, speakers, that the campaign of the ANC is pitching up very, drastically. If you can compare the campaign of the ANC now with what has happened 5-6 weeks ago, you will agree with us to say now, really, we are, swelling the ground, and people are responding to our campaign, and definitely we are smelling victory as the ANC. So then the issue of coalition doesn't arise because we can clearly see.
I'll pose the question to the Executive Mayor of Mangaung Metro, and that's Thabo Manyoni. Exactly what happens if the ANC doesn't have an outright win in the metros, and what are the implications for setting up a government there?
You know, many people were thinking that Brexit will not succeed, Britain will not move out of EU. But that was a wish. The main thing is the taste of the pudding is in the eating. And in this regard, it is about, at the end of the day, whether people are going to vote overwhelmingly or not. So it's not about analysts, it's not about prophets, it's about the actual work that basically, ultimately will happen. It's not about these polls. So let's come to the issue that you raised. What will then happen if there is no outright majority in those metros, of which obviously I don't believe in. But if there is, obviously politics are about coalitions, are about working together and so on. At the end of the day, it is about having policies that will make sure that this country functions. And I think in that regard, the ruling party has the experience, and it has also, it is a brand of unity in diversity. So there won't necessarily be low margins when it comes to elections. Remember, we had these discussions when COPE was coming to play. Everybody was thinking the landscape is going to change and, you know, we will have coalitions and so on. That never happened. Basically, what you then realized during that time was the high rise and the quick fall of parties that are fashionable. And I think in this regard, we basically are still engaged in those type of discussions. The ANC in these areas is going to win overwhelmingly. We would not even consider coalitions.
All right, let's invite Ubabu Jabu Mahlangu, national spokesperson for SANCO, and looking at the leadership in Tshwane with Mr. Msinga, and Umamtoro Didiza. I mean, the one obviously being a novice in politics and the other having a pedigree, being a career politician. Do you think that this will influence the voters, particularly those that are undecided?
Indeed, I think what we have picked up from last week to this week is that of the 21% of undecided voters, which had indicated that the DA was ahead of the ANC this week around, things have changed. There's a shift towards the ANC, and I guess in the remaining 10 days, we are going to see even a bigger shift. This is naturally, it's a phenomenon that I had raised yesterday, but I also need to dispel the myth that you have best performing municipalities by the DA. If you go into those municipalities, most of them are obviously in the Western Cape. Most of them are beneficiaries of the Verwoerdian government. They are right-wing municipalities where coloureds and blacks are seriously underdeveloped. The same thing that happened in the West, in Cape Town City itself. So my view is things will shift to the ANC.
I'll give Mr. Mashaba here to respond to all those comments, especially when it comes to the areas which have been your trump card all along that you've governed, and that doesn't seem to sway the voters, at least not the core base of voters.
Well, it's interesting what the gentleman from who just really spoken, actually referring to our performance. The performance of the metros, the study done, it's not done based on racial implications, was done on the performance of municipalities. Out of the 20 municipalities measured, and the measurement standards was the same. And in the process, out of the 10 best performing were DA-led. Out of the best of the West of the 10 West performing were all ANC. The criteria for measurement was the same. So it had absolutely nothing to do with the racial connotation that is really bringing into the mix. So what this says to you, where DA governs, they govern really better.
So
and this is not a study done by the DA. It was really done quite independently.
Let's afford Sudesh to challenge that.
In all of those municipalities ANC control, what you're seeing is the level of basic services increasing over a period of time. And what that study is measuring is the financial environment in municipalities. Now, I'm not contesting that it's okay to have a municipality that's poorly run. I'm saying the key indicator of quality of life is not just how well the municipality performs financially, but how the quality of life of citizenry is changed for the better. And if you look at those variables, it paints
Let's bring it back though to Tshwane, where we are at the moment. And I just want to make this, Heinrich, where the DA is saying you will do better than the ANC, you certainly won't do any worse. What does better mean, and how do you quantify doing better than the ANC in Tshwane currently?
Thank you, Sylvia. Just maybe to answer part of that question, I'd like to come back to Sudesh and this idea of quality of life, which is a critical measure. If you look at the only municipality that we govern as a DA in Gauteng, it's Midvaal. In 2010, the Gauteng provincial government found it to have the highest quality of life in the province, and it also has, by the way, the lowest unemployment rate in the province. So, I mean, that I think is a case in point. But I think maybe, though, just coming back to some of the comments made earlier, there was talk about, racialization of this debate. And I think we need to be careful, because I think South Africans are tired of that. I think that, it creates the othering effect. And there is no us and them. There is no them, there's only us. In all our diversity, we represent South Africa.
I mean, we take it from you, our principalities, the leaders that represent us in Parliament, as ordinary citizens. All we want to see is a certain well-functioning Parliament and legislation. But of course, if these race cards and whatever other shenanigans are thrown out in the public domain, it does create discontent. It does create
they brought into the ANC has taken a conscious decision to continue looting our country by dividing us along racial lines. So you listen to Jacob Zuma on a daily basis. You listen to ANC leadership. Everything around them is around racial division.
You don't think it's retaliation, because the DA, given half the opportunity without provocation, will say certain things of slander. Tsotsi number one, Tsotsi number two. So why is it then when it's retaliation? No, but it can't be. This is just posturing. Yes, Mr. Mashaba, but you're also equally as guilty.
I think it will be very unscientific for us to be ahistorical and assume that South Africa starts today or starts in 1994. The reality of the matter is that racial supremacy stands on the heels or on the shoulders of uneven economic participation. And as things stand today, the economy continues to reproduce racial supremacy. So we can't run away from the question of race. And even the performance of the DA, where it is said it is good, it is a fact that it stands on the shoulders of apartheid special development. Many of the areas where they govern are areas which were previously developed by the apartheid government. And Comrade Subesh was putting it correctly, and says that one of the key measures is that of financial performance. And I can tell you, in the former Bantustans, where black people were kept as reserves of labor, no economic industry at all. You cannot...
Ndume, so we have 2 weeks until the elections. All I wanted to know, what will you do differently in Tshwane?
Maybe just to respond to that, to say that as a point of departure, we have to assume that we are common people with a common destiny. We understand we have deep structural inequalities that has brought us to where we are, but unless we begin at the point of a common destiny, one nation with one future, we can't progress forward. Now, to answer you specifically, what we'll do differently is we'll focus on the poorest of the poor. If you look at Cape Town, 67% of a 2014-2015 budget was in poor areas. And that's not just a bulk rollout.
I know, it's not true.
But let me just say this then. That is a statistic.
No. Check with the specialist.
Okay.
Let's stick with Tshwane. It's safer there. Just please, what is the DA going to do differently in Tshwane?
If again, we have to come back there. If you look at what that rollout of that large amount of funding, the 2.5 billion social package is in Cape Town, you'll see that it is specifically aimed at indigent households, and that's what we'll do in Tshwane. We will focus on the poorest of the poor, and they're very specific policy objectives.
I take it there's no plan directly for Tshwane, because that was the original question.
Of course there's a plan for Tshwane. The plan is job creation by creating an enabling environment through infrastructure investment, like we've done where we govern. The plan is clean government, stopping corruption, opening the tender process at the adjudication stage. The plan is having responsive service delivery, where we actually listen to the residents. We ensure that the ward committees are functional, which is not the case in a large part of Tshwane. So there are very specific points, but the underlying point is that it's about equity, and that's what the DA stands for. We stand for an equitable approach to government, and that's what we'll do in Tshwane.
The ANC government in Tshwane has done extremely well. Surveys after surveys have shown that they continue to do well. And I think the DA has got it wrong again. The role of a municipality is to create an enabling environment for investment such that jobs can be created. Municipalities do not create jobs. They are not a labor-intensive industry. So the point that I'm making is that as the ANC government, we've been doing extremely well in Tshwane, and our people continue to have confidence in the ANC and the work the ANC has done, in particular in poor areas. In the previous term, we have seen the mayor of Tshwane handing over land to our people. Many people now have title deeds, churches were given land. In the previous term of office, we've seen the mayor of Tshwane
so in terms of the title deeds, if I may ask, yes, why is it that it took Ekurhuleni so long? I know we're focusing on Tshwane and Johannesburg at the moment, to issue title deeds when it was something that the DA had proposed for in perpetuity.
The issue of title deeds in South Africa is extremely complex because remember, our people were dispossessed land, and after the dispossession, when they went back to townships, for a very long time, that land continued to belong to the state, to the apartheid state. We had to deal with that first. Secondly, there are areas where we built RDPs. We had to demarcate those areas such that we were able to give people title deeds correctly where they stay and where they own. So I can assure you that with the work that the mayor outgoing leadership of Tshwane has done, the people of Tshwane have confidence in the ANC, and come the third, they will vote the ANC, because we've seen serious programs that are aimed at improving the lives of our people.
But this was not given to you on a silver platter, by the way. The DA is sitting at 40.3% for the choice that people would want as a preferred party to vote for. The ANC at 47%. So this is very marginal. It's not a given that you will get the outright majority.
The manner in which we treat surveys are not the most reliable measure. We have our own tried and tested method of doing door-to-door, going to townships where people are engaging our communities in the comfort of their homes, and they assure us that they are going to vote the African National Congress. So you really can't rely on surveys. I mean, they've been proven wrong time and again. So as the ANC, we are not shaken by surveys. We are confident that come the third, we are going to win Tshwane.
So how do you go? Yes, how do you go after the 7%?
Well, I think, Cindy, what is actually quite disturbing, and I think ANC keeps on insulting our people about their successes, about their so-called successes. When you have a city like Johannesburg, Pretoria, we're seeing jobs bloodbath. Our people are losing jobs. And if you go anywhere in our community, I've been personally campaigning on the campaign trail for the last 6 months. The biggest issue facing our people today is high unemployment. The city of Johannesburg, when Park Stow took over in 2011, unemployment was already at a very high level, sitting at 27%. Today, sitting at 31, 32%. And we have the mayor who's spending public money, millions every day, saying to people of Johannesburg that things are going well. What do you measure? Because if employment, job creation is the #1 issue that's worrying people of Johannesburg, and you tell them you are successful,
yeah, let's stick with Tshwane for this particular.
And you spend your money to actually promote that you are doing well.
Mr. Mashaba, I don't want to convolute issues, because that's when everything just gets very murky. In Tshwane, in terms of infrastructure delivery, as per the allegation from the DA saying that it's wasteful expenditure, nothing has been done, and yet the numbers say 47.5% of people will still vote for the ANC, although 42% would want, have confidence in the DA delivering services. And those are two distinctions that we need to make.
Well, the one point is to say that the economy has shed jobs. It's not just a function of government. It's the private sector. If you look at where those jobs were shed, it's in the manufacturing industry, and that's a function of the global economy. So to say that the government has shed jobs is not factual, because in fact, in all of the municipalities across the province, you've seen municipalities initiating public works programs that are not responding to the fundamental question of creating jobs, but they're creating a social net for those communities who are victims of those global economic conditions. Hendrik makes a point that they're spending 250 million rand in Tshwane. We're spending 450 million rand through a targeted program to provide poverty alleviation. We're spending over 120 million rand employing young people in programs that gives them skills. There was reference to Tsepo 10,000. As I speak to you now, we've invested 320 million rand in contracts to young entrepreneurs, where the state says we need to use the procurement budget of the city to transform the economy. And I can say to you now that this DA in the city of Tshwane over the past 5 years has voted against that budget. This DA continues to be opposed to the rollout of free Wi-Fi in the city of Tshwane. This DA continues to be opposed to the Tsepo 10,000 program, which is employing young people. So, I mean, and this is the point, that the communities are indeed not oblivious to all of this. Every single community in Tshwane has felt the ANC government, and that's why we remain, and that's not to undermine what the survey is saying. All we're saying is that we're not focusing on the survey result. We're engaging our people, we're acknowledging where there are legitimate concerns and challenges that remain, but we must also say, what has this government done to better the lives of our people?
Well, we've also heard the leadership. Yes, I hate to interrupt you, but we also heard from the ANC leadership that there is a legitimate concern of the shedding of the votes, particularly when it comes to the big scandals, etc. But I just want to come back to the economic hub, that being Gauteng, and specifically Tshwane, and engage Executive Mayor in Tlokwe. Councillor Khumalo, when you, as an ANC member, looking at these numbers, only a 7% difference according to our statistics, what is it that the ANC now needs to do to ensure that you have an overall victory and able to compete against the DA that is hot on your heels?
Firstly, I must indicate to you that the ANC will win all the municipalities in the Northwest Province. We've got one of the best manifestos compared to none. Our slogan is that we're building better communities, but local government is in your hands. Now, in Tlokwe, in 2011, we didn't register 7 wards. That's how it started, which was quite bad. Now, in these current elections, we've got all the wards registered, and I can tell you the amount of work we are putting, we are going to beat the DA, EFF, Freedom Front, all of them combined. That's what is going to happen. We found our existence in Chapter 7 of the Constitution that requires us to provide sanitation, water, sewer, electricity, everything, and we're doing that quite well. Tlokwe municipalities got 95% collection of rates and taxes. We are one of the best in the Northwest Province, on the top 4. We also providing free electricity, water to more than 12,733 people in terms of the indigent policies. So I can tell you that the 7% difference that's actually there. It does not arise. And also, remember that we and Ventersdorp, we are now called Municipality 405. Now, Ventersdorp is now, together with Tlokwe, is a new municipality in which the naming process will start quite soon. So I can tell you we're confident come the 3rd of August, the ANC will win overwhelmingly in all the municipalities. But over and above in Tlokwe, we are doing quite well. We might have been in news for the bad reasons in terms of the constitutional court issues, the by-elections issue of the independence. But I can tell you we are on track. We're doing very well, and we're going to win overwhelmingly.
Tshwane particularly was on fire, under siege. We saw the burning and destruction of property, with ANC members themselves, or some, saying that they are not happy with the candidacy of, or candidature of Umam Didiza. So there is still a cohort of ANC members who are disgruntled, who even went on to say they will punish the ANC and vote DA deliberately so that the party doesn't sit on its laurels and this high level of arrogance. And these are the words of disgruntled ANC members. What are you going to do differently now to ensure that this gap is widened between you and the DA?
No, I think the ANC is very clear, and the manner in which we intervened at Tshwane and many other areas where there were issues related to candidate selection. You will agree with me that those are things of the past. If you look at the whole South Africa now, there's stability. So we are, as the ANC, we are hard at work. We are moving in terms of door-to-door campaign, moving street by street, village to village, region to region, and the response that we are getting, and I think we must be honest, the response that we are getting from our people, they are saying, even themselves, saying that ANC, you have done so much for us. We have provided water, provided electricity, housing. These are the challenges that we think we must address moving forward. In fact, the response that we're getting from the ground, it's clear that indeed, without any doubt, come the 3rd of August, ANC will win.
All right, for now, though, we take a quick ad break. Stay with SA Decides, a convenience poll. We'll be talking about Johannesburg, hotly contested. The numbers are too revealing a picture that is quite riveting and interesting as well. We'll dissect all those numbers when we come back just after this.